Hey guys, good morning. This is Ainslie Fukuda. I'm the Executive Vice President of Master Brand in Wave Electronics. Thank you guys for joining. Looks like we have a good number of people online, and I'm sure a few more will join after we get started. So today I wanted to kind of go through a couple of things. One, I wanted to talk about the history of ELURA, run through the line for some of you guys that are not familiar, and then most importantly, kind of show you around my house and how I utilize the product. And I think it's important to just point out a few best practices. And so you guys can have some really good takeaways to maximize the performance of all of our audio products. So hopefully the presentation won't last that long. We've got 2 hours slated, but I want to try to get in as much questions at the end as possible. And there should be a little group chat icon or application that you can start aggregating all of your questions, inputting all your questions, and then we have our Director of Marketing, Holly Ford, that's kind of navigating and controlling the slide, and then we'll answer those questions, or try to answer most of them at the very end. So the point of this really is for you guys to get out those questions that you've always wanted to ask regarding whether it's placement of subwoofers, how to tune a system, why don't you have this speaker, and then how do I utilize this particular amplifier. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully this is very helpful for everyone here, and if it's popular, then we'll continue doing more in-depth ones, and if it's not, then we won't do them at all. So let's go ahead and get started on the next slide. So the ELURA history really starts with kind of my background and my brother's background, Mark Fukuda, who is the CEO of Wave Electronics. Mark owned a car audio store in the late 80s, and I grew up going to that car audio store when I was, say, 12 years old, and he would kind of put me to work sweeping the floors, cleaning the bathrooms, and by the time I was in high school, I was already installing car audio systems in the early 90s. Basic amplifiers, basic speakers, and customer cars that were there just for the day. That evolved into competing, because at my brother's store, he had a lot of competition vehicles, and he had the world's loudest car audio system from 1990 to 96. Is the longest reign that anybody had in that particular field. But along with making a car loud, we also had to make the car sound really good. And then we also had to install the products properly, because we were judged on those two disciplines as well. So by the time I was in college, we were ripping out interiors of cars, rebuilding dashboards, door panels, headliners, all in the effort to make that car sound better. So we were making small speaker enclosures in the kick panels, putting subwoofers in the dash, of course, along with all of the high-end amplifiers, and DSP processors to tune the cars as good as we could. And that was a rough environment to make something sound good, especially a car, because you got a lot of reflective materials around you, like glass and leather or vinyl, and then you're offset from the speaker on the passenger side, so you're biased to the driver's side. And then usually your subwoofers are in the back of the car, but you want the bass up front. So it's like the worst environment, but it was really good training for the ELURA brand. So in 2012, just if you don't know, I've been with Wave since 2003, selling, of course, other manufacturers' speaker lines. But in 2012, we came up with the idea, well, we really need to have our own brand of speakers, HDMI cables, brackets, all these commodity goods that you guys know of today as Master Brand. And we did that because we believe we could. We believe we could make a better product. Two, we had the heartbeat or the pulse of our customers, knowing what they needed. And three, we had to take control of what I call our own destiny, because we wanted a line that was ours, that wasn't sold online, wasn't sold by anyone else, and something that we could control the quality. So in 2012, we started with just a couple of speakers, and it was mildly successful. And it was mildly successful because we didn't have really all the other peripherals for you guys. We wanted to be that one-stop shop. We needed the brackets, the screens, the racks, the TV mounts. In addition to that, we needed a program to wrap around it. And that's when we launched, I think in 2013, the 9-in-3 rebate program, where dealers can get up to 9% off on a quarterly basis if they hit certain goals, right? And I think the goals are a lot easier to achieve these days because we've attracted some kind of top tier manufacturers like Savant or Martin Logan to the program that allows you to easily hit those higher tiers. So one other thing I wanted to point out is our partnership with Sonance. So around 2014, we started doing really well, especially with our red label series, our 6.5Zs. And Sonance wanted to test out that particular speaker. It was just a 6.5-inch speaker. I think back then we were selling it for $99 a pair. And they said, well, that's really cheap. That's really inexpensive. So send us a pair. We want to evaluate them. So we sent them a pair. They tested them amongst, of course, some of their speakers and then some other competitors like B&W and Revel. And they came back to us and said, this little red label speaker is incredible. It outperforms some of the other brands that cost 5 to 6 times more than your speaker. And we were incredibly impressed. And so that kind of spawned the relationship between ELURA and Blue Label. And we decided to create a series of 7 speakers together called Blue Label by Sonance. That's still in the line today. And I think we added one more, which was the little S4. So I think we have 8 speakers in total. And so since then, we've had a great partnership. We've done really well with the product. They're very happy. We're very happy. And in 2016, we launched that Blue Label line, and it won best sound quality out of the CEDIA show. So very successful launch and very happy. So let's go on to the next slide. So talking about background, here's some of the cars that I built back in the day. On the left-hand side, that was a car built for Focal and Pioneer. It won expert class, which is the highest level class during that time at IASCA and USAC. And I installed an 11-inch subwoofer in the dash. I used Milbert tube amps, which was kind of the first to put a tube amplifier in a car. And then the subwoofer enclosure was 2 13-inch drivers facing each other in an isobaric configuration, and an aquarium enclosure. It was a piece of acrylic designed to be used as an aquarium, but we used it as an enclosure. And then on the right-hand side was another award-winning sound quality car that was built in the early 90s. I was a part of the team to do all the fabrication and sound quality back then. So that's just a tidbit of the history. I think the next picture you'll probably enjoy. This is me and my brother after I found a van that he built in '97. I bought it online a few years ago. I dressed up like him with the mullet and the tight shirt and gave it to him. So he said he didn't know whether to cry or laugh. So that was a good moment. After the car audio stint, I went to work still with my brother at a company called Cleopatra Home Theaters. This is probably late 90s, early 2000s. We're building home theater facades. And this one's pretty gaudy, but I guess it looked good for 1998, 1999. But we would build the prosceniums, the columns, the stage, everything. Everything was built from scratch, the acoustic panels, and it was almost like a kit. We would draw it in CAD, build it, drive out to the homeowner's house, and assemble it. So that's enough about me. Let's start diving into the line a little bit. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the ELURA line. I'm not going to go into deep detail across the whole line, but I do want to point out a couple of new additions. One is the S4 speaker. It's in the middle, the very top. That's our new 4-inch Blue Label speaker by Sonance. It does have the dry carbon impregnated paper cone, just like the rest of the line, has the same timbre matching. And the reason why we designed this or came out with this is so that it can match the standard can lights that are in most houses. So it's a 6.5-inch overall diameter. We do have optional square grills for that speaker. We do have optional square grills for 6.5s as well. If you guys need a 6.5-inch square grill for an S6.5 or a B6.5Zs. Other thing to point out is that we do have back boxes for the B6.5Z, the black label, and the red label 6.5s and 8s. Okay. Fairly new addition, probably a year old, is the SBR1. Our passive soundbar has been extremely popular with you guys, so thank you for that business. Pretty basic soundbar. We went through and listened to some of the top soundbars in the industry, took a couple of measurements, saw what the soundbars were doing or not doing well, and that's how we try to make ours kind of best in class, but best in class for the money. And in addition to that, use a magnetic grill. Most recently, we essentially just took that soundbar because a lot of you guys said, well, we love the soundbar, but we want something in a smaller footprint. So this is essentially cut in half using 2 of the active drivers, 2 passives, and a tweeter, and created the LCR1, which does come with a little foot mount, so you can mount it just on a TV stand or mantle, and then you can mount it horizontally on a wall or vertically. So this one has also been very, very popular with you guys, and thank you for the business. Outdoor speakers, I think they're pretty basic. You guys are very familiar. Just one thing I wanted to point out is our 6.5, the outdoor B70s or W70s do come with a 70-volt tap. As you can see, kind of in the middle there with a little dial, you can dial it in, and I think that's a great feature. Maybe not all of you will use, but some of you will use on a commercial environment. These just arrived last week. The D-Rocks. So we have them in sandstone and granite. And one thing to point out, people don't realize, they're fairly small. It's a fairly small footprint. You can see they're 11 3/4 by 11 1/4. But that's an 8-inch driver. We only came out with really one series, which was an 8-inch. So we're able to kind of shove this 8-inch that was very high performing, can handle a ton of power, but doesn't need a lot of airspace to play low frequencies. So very lucky in finding this particular coax driver, putting it in the smallest rock that we could find. And listen, it's only been a week or so since we've had them, but dealers text me, send me emails all the time, just how amazed they are, how loud and how clear. And for this speaker, I tuned it to be a little on the brighter side. So if you have them inside, which that's what I did in my testing environment, is in my office or multiple different homes inside, it is a little bright. But as soon as I brought it outside, and if you have them by the pool, you've got the fountains going, the water features going, it's amongst the shrubs or the bushes, it performs very well. And I noticed that other rock speakers that I tested, they sounded very flat. It was almost like there wasn't a tweeter inside the speaker at all. And so very impressed by how these things perform, and especially for the price point, $199 a pair. Subwoofers, this is my favorite category because I love bass and I can't get enough of it. I think you guys are familiar with most of the lineup. Just one thing I want to point out is the Tri-Sub is definitely the best performer, the most popular subwoofer that we have. So in the top left, we have an 8-inch version and 10-inch version. These are our most powerful subwoofers. These are subwoofers that impress people probably more than anything else that we sell, just because of their ability to play very low, to fill the room with nice, deep, smooth bass, and especially for the price point. I mean, it's very inexpensive for the amount of performance that you get out of it. And just to point out, it's an active subwoofer on the front and then 2 passives on either side. And I've been asked, can you put them in cabinets? Absolutely, you can. Just if you turn it up very, very loud, and if you've got dishes above the cabinet or inside a cabinet, you may have a little bit of rattling because it does pressurize the area very, very well. medium volumes, more realistic volumes to blend in with the higher frequencies, you're not going to have a problem with rattling really anything. So probably one of my favorite subs that we have is our in-ceiling sub. This is a 10-inch bandpass passive subwoofer that essentially after it's installed, all you see is this little grill. It's a little white grill that looks like a HVAC vent, and it is paintable. The speaker is a fairly big enclosure at 9.2 inches tall, so can't really install it in a house that has a room above it or a flooring above it. But for home theater environments, even outdoor environments, I love this thing. It really rocks, and it works very, very well with a few of our amplifiers, not just our subwoofer amplifier. Amplifier lineup, we used to have a 50 by 6, now we have a 100 by 6, much more versatile, much more power. We have a 50 by 12, 500 by 1, which is our dedicated subwoofer amplifier, and a 150 by 2 that could be used as a high pass or a low pass subwoofer amplifier as well. All of these amps have done very, very well for us. I think the new most popular amplifier is this 100 by 6 just because of its versatility. And we're going to talk about its versatility and how it's being used today. It's my dog in the background barking. So what we're going to do is do a walk around of the house and talk about the audio in my kitchen, talk about the audio in my theater room, and then talk about my outdoor audio. And I think this will kind of help you guys with the location or where I put some of the speakers, why I chose the speakers I did, and we'll talk about the performance and maybe even some of the pitfalls, because I did screw up, and I think it's to your benefit. So let me turn on the audio. All right. The dog is being put in jail right now. So we're in my house in Richmond, Texas. Let me turn the video around just a second. Let's see. All right. So we're here in the kitchen. And it's pretty basic, I think, setup. Got the kitchen with a little kitchenette off to the side. When I first moved into the house, I installed speakers here over the island, like most people do. And I thought I wanted audio over here above the kitchenette. But I noticed that, well, I don't really sit over here that often. And I'd rather have more dispersion on this side of the room. But at the same time, I installed my subwoofers. And you can see our in-ceiling subwoofers here. You can see a little grill here. So I installed one there, and then one way over here left. So that's our two in-ceiling subwoofers. And what I don't like about this setup is that the subwoofer to the far right is probably 15 feet away from the in-ceiling drivers here. What that does, it does a couple of things. One, the benefit was that it produced lower bass and there was more of it, that it created more of a separation between the high frequency speaker and the subwoofer. So if you walked into this area, into the kitchenette, you heard a lot of bass, but then the high frequencies were over here. And so I would definitely say that was a mistake on my part. I do want to move that subwoofer closer to the high frequency speakers. I probably want to keep them within 5 to 6 feet, okay? I do love this sub in the corner, and it's about 5.5 feet away from that S8 driver. And that has worked out incredibly well, incredibly well. So if I were to redo it, I would take that sub and move it closer to, let's say, that can light and right behind it. That would be perfect. You want really good coupling between the subwoofer and the high frequency speakers. You want all of that sound to sound like it's coming out of those 8-inch high frequency speakers. You don't want that bass separated. So I've had some other questions asking, well, Ainslie, for these in-ceiling subs, do I put them in the middle of the room or closer to the wall? Well, in most cases, you almost can't put it closer to the wall. That's as close as I could get that sub just because of the pitch of the roof. So you have that to contend with, okay? So the closer you do get it to the wall, you will get a loading effect, and it will be louder in certain locations, and it won't be as loud in others. So you'll have what's called a room mode or a dead spot. It's very, very difficult to predict when you're gonna have these room modes or dead spots. The only way to really test it, and I've done it before, is to get a ladder, put the subwoofer on top of the ladder, get as close to the ceiling as you can, get an amplifier and run some test tones, or at least a song that has repetitive bass, consistent repetitive bass, and move the subwoofer around the room. If you have that luxury, that is the best thing to do, because you have all these things to contend with. You have openings, you have hallways, you have stairs. What you're trying to do is pressurize a room. You have no idea how that subwoofer is going to react. It's almost more predictable on how a sub's going to react outdoors than it is indoors. So best practices, get the subwoofer within 5 or 6 feet of the high frequency speakers. You can load it against the wall. I wouldn't get too terribly close. Or you could put it right in the middle. These subs do really well, really close to the high frequency speakers. You may not get as much of a loading effect, but the bass will be more consistent and even, okay? So let's talk about how this system is wired just in the kitchen. So Holly, if you could transition to that. So this is a pretty basic setup. I've got an amp, 100 by 6, 3 separate zones. I've got 2 S8s on one zone, 2 S8s on the other, and I've got 2 of our in-ceiling subs bridged to the 3rd zone. That 3rd zone also has a switch kind of in the middle of the amplifier that you can switch it from 8 ohm to 4 ohm to maximize the power output. So that's why I love this amplifier. Built-in crossovers. You can loop out to additional subwoofers if needed. Small form factor, and it is a juggernaut for the price point and its size. Very happy with this guy. Now, let's say if you wanted to do maybe an outdoor configuration, I think we have a little diagram for that. So this is the same 100 by 6 amplifier and 4 rocks, but we're just utilizing a Sonance subwoofer and bridging it, because it's dual voice coil, both coils over that 3rd zone. And this also works very, very well. So looking for an inexpensive system that'll knock my socks off, this performs very well for the money. So let's transition over to the theater room, okay? And we're going to talk about the theater room and what the problem is. If you're from Dallas and you've been to our Dallas location, I think this room should look really familiar. I always liked the look of that room. So I just decided to replicate that room here. As you can see, the room is very square. So focus less on the columns and the sushi bar lights. Let's look at where the subwoofer is. So we got the subwoofer right here, right? And we got a very square room. So Holly, if you can kind of go back to that presentation. Probably the #1 question I get asked is, okay, Ainslie, how do I get good bass? How do I get good, consistent, even bass? And I get this question all the time. Before this counter day, we polled some people, and this is probably the #1 question is subwoofer location, how do I get the most output? So the problem is that the biggest factor, or one of the biggest factors, is the size of the room, okay? The size of the room, and also the openings or hallways or any other irregularities to the room are going to affect bass output, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to pressurize a zone evenly with bass. And if you have an uneven room, you have a big problem, right? So in the best case scenario, if you were able to design a room, let's say if you have a client as a house that's being built and you have the say-so to adjust the room size, try to get it more rectangle than square. You're going to have much better performance, audio performance, not even from bass, but even from mid-bass and mid-range, okay? So, like I said, square rooms are the worst for bass output, especially for room modes. You're trying to fit a 30 hertz wave into a room that's, typically if you have a room that's my size, it's only probably 18 inches, 18 foot deep. And that's I think 130 foot wave, sound wave. You're trying to fold and get into a room. So you've got a ton of reflection. You've got a ton of reflection, not only from the side walls, but also from the floor and the ceiling. The ceiling also does play a big role into it. So the more ideal room size would say be 17 foot wide, 23 foot long, and 10 foot tall. My neighbor has a theater room that's more rectangle, lives right next door, and he can just put one little 8-inch sub pretty much anywhere up front, and it sounds like a 12. It sounds incredible, fills a room with nice, clean, low bass, and I'm totally jealous. But a lot of the times you walk into a client's house, the room's already built, maybe it already has one coax for the subwoofer up front or in the back. You can't really change too much. And also, the wife or the interior designer has their say-so too. So what do you do? What do you do when you walk into that room and it's completely square and you've got a dead space right where the sitting area is? Well, there's not a ton you can do if you cannot change the size of the room, right? You can change the seating position. So in my theater, I've had to actually move the sectional back a few feet. As you can see here, it used to be about 3 foot closer, and 3 foot closer was in the no bass zone whatsoever. Moving it 3 foot back made a tremendous difference. And so I was pretty happy with that outcome. The other thing we've done with this particular subwoofer up front is, instead of putting it in the direct corner, I've moved it about 3 foot in. And so 3 to 4 foot in is a good rule of thumb on most theater systems. And I say theater because you're more in an enclosed environment. Because the closer you get to that corner, you're going to have more of a loading effect from the floor and the walls and the ceiling, causing it to be overly boomy, okay? And you don't want it to necessarily be boomy. You want it to blend in with your high frequency speakers. Mine are behind this perf screen, by the way. So I like it 3 to 4 foot inside the wall, okay? And so with that combination, with this sectional move back a few feet, I was closer to the sweet spot. Still wasn't in it. So what did I do? The next best thing to do, outside of ensuring that you have your right crossover points and phasing, is put additional subs. So I put a subwoofer back here, and it smoothed out everything. So it sounded better in this seat, that seat, that seat. The bass was nice and even, incredibly smooth. The problem is my kids like to run around the couch. So they would trip over it, especially when the lights are off, and any other kids that were here. So we had to take that sub out. So I lost that battle. So multiple subwoofers in a challenging room definitely help. And I've got some data to kind of show you. So if you want to scroll over to that, Holly. So why more than one subwoofer? So this is a really cool test by, let's see, Acoustic Frontiers. That I've kind of followed them for a few years, and this was their theater room that they did some testing on. And they said, okay, let's do a test with one subwoofer on the front wall and measure it in 3 different locations. So they had 3 theater chairs side by side, left to right, and they used a microphone, and they put the microphone in one seat, and they did a measurement, and that's probably the blue line. And they did another one, that's the red line, and they did the third one, that's the green line. And they noticed with one subwoofer, there was huge differences in the listening positions of the room. So it's very inconsistent. As you can see there, one of the listening positions had a dip at 45 hertz. It's that green line. Another one at say 53 hertz, it's a blue line. Another one at say 62 hertz. So you don't want those dips. Those dips mean that you're missing out on some output, and or you're causing other cancellations with maybe the other drivers in the room, the other speakers in the room. You want it as nice and smooth as possible. You know, it's never going to be perfect. If it is, hats off to you. You did a great job. But the goal is to get it nice and smooth, and then also very consistent from seat to seat in the room. So what happens when you add 2 subs? So this is the same room, adding 2 subs up front with the 3 measurements. And it looks like one measurement, but all 3 measurements are layered on top of each other. That's how consistent it was from all 3 seats to one another. And so as you can see, it makes the room and the bass much more consistent. We still have a problem though. See that dip at say 55 hertz? Still a bit of an issue, okay? So what do? Well, we add more subs. This is what it looks like with 4 subs, 2 in the front wall and 2 on the back wall. Notice we're still very consistent, so it sounds the same in every seat, but we've cleaned up that dip at say 55 hertz. Now it's nice and smooth. We do still have a little one at 80 hertz. I would be less concerned with that, especially if you're using larger drivers in the front. You can play with the crossovers and smooth that out. And also, of course, the EQ, if you can give access to the EQ into the receiver. So huge advocate of multiple subwoofers. The question would be, okay, well, does it need to be the same subwoofer front and rear? Yeah, ideally. Does it need to be the same volume? Absolutely not. In my experience, having my sub up front and the subwoofer in the rear was maybe running about 25% of the subwoofer up front. The idea is to blend them together to make it sound like it's just nice, smooth bass coming from somewhere in the room. You shouldn't necessarily locate or be able to tell, oh, I hear that sub playing behind me, or hear, you know, the one in the front. So tuning is important, especially volume output, location of the subwoofers, front and rear is important as well. And then phasing is important as well. Phasing is really going to be dependent on the distance between those subwoofers, the location in the room, and then also your seating position, because they need to be not necessarily in phase with each other, but when the sound arrives at your ear, along with the high frequencies, all of that recipe needs to be in phase. So go on to the next slide. So this is I think from Floyd Toole, which is a highly regarded acoustic master in our industry. And so he did some tests on multiple subwoofers. And on the right-hand side, you can see different subwoofers in one room. He tried them in the middle, front to rear, side to side. Ultimately, he said that the bottom right-hand corner was the most consistent and smoothest, okay? Now, I don't know any interior designer or wife that would allow us to do that configuration, unless it was maybe an in-wall configuration. But I mean, having those subs out on the side isn't going to be very aesthetically pleasing, okay? I personally like the one right above it. So it would be the configuration in the middle right. That's the one I've tried, and it works really, really well. Yep. Now, from his findings, Mr. Toole said that the configuration to the left, the 4 subs, quarter of the room length and width, was his absolute best outcome, most consistent in different size rooms. The problem is you couldn't really do anything else in the room because you had these subs sitting in the middle of the floor, right? So it was almost not even a consideration. However, what about in-ceiling subs? So you could have that configuration within in-ceiling subwoofers, right? And I guess that's what I wanted to get across is with these new in-ceiling subs, it kind of opens the doors to allowing us to install speakers or subwoofers wherever they're not supposed to be installed, or wherever we didn't even think they could be installed before. And so I guess my advice for you guys is when you get into an environment or a room that is possibly challenging, because they all are kind of challenging, is to pre-wire it for subwoofers and key locations, okay? If I have a theater room that I know is square, I'm gonna try to run at least one subwoofer up front and one in the back, okay? If you get into a new construction home, I would wire for 4 in-ceiling subwoofers. It's just speaker wire, it's cheap, right? That would be my advice, because it is difficult to calculate and estimate what kind of problems you're gonna run into because of the reflections of the room, because of the room openings, and even sheetrock. You have to think about it. You're pressurizing a room, and if that room flexes at a certain frequency, it causes cancellations and it causes additional issues. And I'm sure the homeowner is not thinking about dynamitting inside the wall or adding some kind of sheetrock with sound deadening material. So you have to work around a lot of these challenges. So let's go outside and talk about the outdoor system here. Turn the camera around. Glad it wasn't raining today. So I added this extension to the house, okay? It's probably 25 foot or so, but I wanted it to have some great audio, right? So I used what I learned in the kitchen, and this is right when our in-ceiling subs launched, to install 4 S8s. You see one there with a subwoofer, and I've got the other subwoofer right here with an S8. So if you can see all 4 S8s, try not to fall in the pool while I do this. All 4 S8s with 2 subs, same configuration like I have in the kitchen. But this thing is insane. It actually outperforms the kitchen because the bass is more even, because I moved the subwoofers closer into the listening environment. So you're almost surrounded by that bass. And the bass travels. I mean, just ask any of my neighbors. They love it. But it is incredible, the amount of output. Also have a garden series system with subwoofers out here. I've got 3 subs. Let's see, 1 there. I've got 1 over here, and I've got 1 by the fence. I would say that the subwoofers in the ceiling overpower the 312s that are in the yard. It is incredible. Last thing, and we'll go to some of the questions, is subwoofer placements for landscape systems. I love them by the house. By the house, if you only have 1 sub that you have to place strategically in the middle of the house, like this one here, loaded up against the house, works incredibly well versus out by the yard or out by the fence, okay? That's why I did 2 of them loaded by the house. So definitely rocks. So I'll stop there. I'm gonna walk back inside and we'll look at what questions you guys have.
Okay, one of the first questions we got was from Kevin, and he asks if there are any plans to add a powered soundbar.
You know, I've looked at that, I've researched it. The challenge is, especially for us, is that we're a distributor and we represent multiple brands. We represent, of course, Sonos, Denon, Helios, DefTech, and we have to support those other manufacturers. And there's things that these other manufacturers do better than us. So at this time, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because we want to support what those guys are doing. And the volume, the amount of volume that we would have to do to even financially compete against those guys, it just wouldn't make sense. I don't even think you guys would buy it. I'd much rather you support the other brands that have the volume.
All right. And then we have another one from Edward. Do you have any weather-resistant grills? I see you have speakers outside, but the grills are rusting. Powder coat, stainless?
Yeah, so the challenge is all of our grills, especially for the in-ceiling speakers, are going to be magnetic grills, and they have to be metal. I've had the quick answer is no. They're not necessarily weather resistant, but that's why we stock additional grills for you guys, and they're fairly inexpensive. I think they're like 10 or 12 bucks, something like that. And so, yeah, they do need to be changed out every few years. I've had mine outside for 4 years now, and I haven't changed them out. But also, I don't live in Galveston. I live in Richmond, so I would assume the corrosion would be more prevalent down there. But no weather-resistant grills at this time.
Okay. Timothy asks, are there any plans for an outdoor sub?
Let's see, what is if you're talking about an in-ground sub, not really. You know, the subwoofers are in-ceiling subwoofers that I would want you guys to put them outdoors in the ceiling. That's not a problem. I do it all the time, and a lot of our customers do. But as far as an in-ground sub, no. Once again, it's all about how many we can produce and sell. And I think that Sonance, our main partner for that, is doing a great job. The problem is we don't sell a lot of individual outdoor subs from them. And I think they're even questioning, like, why do we sell these a la carte?
All right. Another question from Edward. Any plans for a smaller sub, high performance sub, 10-inch cube?
Yeah, I definitely would like to have a smaller sub in the future that really, really outperforms most, let's say, 10-inch subs. I haven't found any that really knock my socks off, and it would take a lot of R&D and tooling to make something that was remarkable. So that definitely is on my wish list, but it wouldn't be for this year. I mean, you have to understand, whenever we manufacture anything, we have to take a lot of things in consideration. One, is there anything competitive out there? Can we outperform everybody else, but for a lower price? And that's kind of our mantra. If we can't, then we're not going to make it, right? We're not going to make something that sounds as good at the same price. So, yeah, it's on the wish list, but the volume has to be there and the output has to be there. I won't sign off on it.
Perfect. Sean asks, 70-volt amp in the plan?
I've had a few, actually I still have a few of them here, and haven't been that excited with them. And it's, once again, it's, can you make something that is going to outperform and be less expensive than, say, a Crown? And right now, nope, not this time. And we want to support those manufacturers, whether it's Crown or Bose Pro.
And then we had a question earlier, is corner placement desired for subs? And I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit. It's really dependent on the room and the subwoofer, right? And so if you have a really small subwoofer, doesn't have a ton of output, and you got one of those square rooms, maybe, just because you're trying to boost as much output as possible. I like to keep it off of that corner so it's not as boomy and it blends in. So 3 to 4 foot off the corner of one of the walls. Yeah. And if you have an opening to the room, I would do it adjacent or kitty corner to that opening, not on the same wall as that opening.
Okay, and that's all the questions we have right now. I don't know if anyone else has any more that they'd like to ask.
All right, guys. Hey, I appreciate it. You know, like I said, based on the popularity, we can have some more in-depth conversations about this. My email address is afukuda@waveinc.net. That's AFUKUDA@waveinc.net. You can also find it on our website. If you have additional questions, maybe we can get together again and go through some other tips and tricks. Like I said, this first one was just an introduction, just to see, you know, how you guys responded, and then talk about some of the best practices. But with that, stay safe. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the business.